The fog doesn't just hide what's in front of you, it hides what's following you. The year was 2022. I was living in Oakland at the time, and I'd made the drive north to visit my parents in Eureka for the weekend. If you've never traveled Highway 101 along the Northern California coast, it's breathtaking during daylight and genuinely unsettling after dark. Long stretches of road with no other vehicles, zero cell reception, hardly any lights. Eerie doesn't quite cover it. I left my parents' house around 8 on a Sunday evening, which was a terrible decision in retrospect. I should have just stayed over and driven back Monday morning, but I had an early shift and convinced myself I'd rather get it over with. Classic mistake. The first few hours were uneventful. The highway had narrowed to 2 lanes by that point, which is typical for rural 101 north of the Bay Area. Somewhere near Trinidad, the fog began rolling in. Coastal fog isn't unusual there, but this felt different. Within about 5 minutes, visibility dropped from clear to maybe 20 feet in front of my car. It was worse than I can properly describe. I slowed to around 35 and pressed on. The sensible choice would have been to pull over and wait, but there aren't many safe places to stop on that stretch, and honestly, I just wanted to be home. I figured taking it slow would be fine. Here's what thick fog does to you, and anyone who's driven through it knows this. It completely distorts your sense of space. You lose all visual reference points. You can't gauge distance. You can't anticipate what's coming. It's deeply disorienting, especially when fatigue is already clouding your judgment. After another 30 minutes or so, I noticed a figure standing on the shoulder. I say figure because that's literally what it looked like at first, just a dark shape maybe 50 feet ahead. As I got closer, I could make out a person, a man based on his height, and he was simply standing there facing the road, not walking, not signaling for help, not on his phone, just standing. I slowed down further as I passed, hoping he might step into the road. He didn't move at all, didn't even turn his head to watch my car go by, which was genuinely unsettling. I got a clear look at his face, and nothing about it seemed particularly remarkable. My initial thought was maybe his vehicle had broken down and he was waiting for assistance, which would make sense, except I hadn't passed any disabled cars on the shoulder, and there was no reason for him to be standing in that exact spot, staring at nothing. I considered turning around to check if he needed help, but something about the situation felt off. I decided it wasn't my concern and kept driving. About 10 minutes later, I saw him again. I'm not exaggerating. Same build, same dark clothing, same posture on the shoulder. The only difference was that now he was on the left side instead of the right, but everything else was identical. I actually said, "What the hell?" to myself, because there was absolutely no way this guy could have gotten ahead of me. I was the only vehicle on that road, and there were no intersecting streets or shortcuts anywhere nearby. The only possibility was that this was a different person who coincidentally looked exactly like the first and was standing in precisely the same bizarre manner. I tried not to look at him as I passed, but I couldn't help myself. I had to confirm whether it was the same man, and once I got a proper look, I was absolutely certain it was. But this time, he turned his head and locked eyes with me as I drove by. I couldn't look away fast enough. Seeing his head snap toward my car was deeply disturbing, and I immediately regretted making that eye contact. I accelerated slightly, not too much because the fog was still thick and I didn't want to run off the road, but I pushed it to around 45. I needed distance between myself and whatever was happening back there. The fog only got worse after that. I could barely make out the center line, so I had no choice but to slow down again. My thoughts were becoming jumbled, which I attributed to the combination of exhaustion, the stress of driving and zero visibility, and what I just witnessed. I kept trying to rationalize it, but nothing added up. My train of thought was shattered when not 3 minutes later, my headlights revealed another person ahead, only this time he was standing in the middle of the road. I had to stop, so I did. He was wearing a hood that concealed his features, so I couldn't see his features, but I had a strong suspicion it was the same man. He remained completely motionless, and that's when genuine fear started to set in. We sat there at an impasse, and even though I couldn't see his face, I could feel him watching me. I didn't know what to do.
I flashed my brights several times, hoping he would move or at least react somehow. He didn't. I shifted into reverse, and when I checked my rearview mirror, I nearly had a heart attack. There was someone behind my car. A figure was slowly approaching from the rear. I yelled out loud, threw the car back into drive, and made a decision. I was boxed in, but I didn't care anymore. This was an active threat. I swerved hard to the right, crossing into the oncoming lane to get around the man blocking the road ahead. He didn't move, and for a moment, I thought I was clear. Then something struck my car from behind. Not a light tap, a violent impact. The entire rear end lurched to the right, and I heard a horrible crunching sound, metal against metal. I somehow kept control of the vehicle and kept driving, assuming I'd been rear-ended by another car. But when I checked my mirrors, there was nothing behind me. Absolutely nothing. No vehicle, no figures, nothing at all. As if the situation weren't already terrifying enough, that made it infinitely worse. I didn't stop to think about it. I sped away as fast as I dared, given the fog. By the time I reached the 101 interchange, visibility had improved dramatically, and for the first time in hours, I felt my mind beginning to settle. But as I calmed, I started processing what had happened. And this might sound strange, but I genuinely convinced myself I hallucinated the whole thing. Here's my reasoning. I'd been driving for nearly 4 hours. I was exhausted. I'd been staring into impenetrable fog for God knows how long, completely isolated on a dark highway. A vivid hallucination seemed impossible. Why it was so specific I couldn't explain, but it was the only explanation that made sense for seeing those people and feeling a crash that apparently never happened. By the time I got home, I was ready to sleep it off and forget the whole nightmare. Then I walked around to the back of my car. The rear bumper was completely destroyed. A massive dent ran almost the entire width of it, which meant whatever hit me had struck with tremendous force. It also meant I hadn't hallucinated anything. The crash was real. I stared at that dent for probably 5 minutes. There was no paint transfer, which there absolutely would have been if another vehicle had hit me. So if it wasn't a car, what could have caused that kind of damage? I eventually called the police to file a report, more just to have it on record than anything else. I've replayed that night countless times over the past 4 years. I've considered every possible explanation. What I've settled on is that I hallucinated the figures, and in my panicked attempt to escape, I struck a guardrail or a mile marker or something similar. But here's what still bothers me. I can accept a hallucination. What I can't accept is hallucinating one thing, the figures, while simultaneously experiencing something real, the crash. The fact that my car was actually damaged has always made me suspect there was something far more sinister at work that night.